And so a lot of people say, Brian, tell me about the first time you met Dan. Well, the first time I met Dan was somewhere around March of 2014. And Dan had heard that London Real was a show that maybe he should be on. And so he's got a whole host of personal assistants up at Guthrie Castle in Scotland. And they were emailing me saying, Dan Pena wants to be on your show. He's the $50 billion man. And I was like, 50 billion what? This is not the guy I want on my show. I used to be a banker, I used to be a capitalist, but now I'm into free content, I'm into ayahuasca, I'm into telling people stories. I don't need some guy that reminds me of who I used to be or reminds me of the things about myself that I hate on my show. So I said no, I ignored them, which is worse than a no, and Dan doesn't like to be ignored. Most people don't ever ignore Dan. So I ignored him for weeks, but they kept pushing, and the honest truth is that sooner or later, I needed to book a show. I needed a guest, and I was like, all right, just send him in, because I didn't have any other guests for that week. So Dan rolls up to my studio, and there we are. Again, I'm dressed in skater gear. Dan is dressed in a three-piece suit, not unlike this one. And I gotta say, he looked like $1 million. He just looked amazing. He was about 70 years old right there. Now, of course, if I told Dan he looked like $1 million, he'd think that was an insult, because he's worth a few $100 million, I believe. But he looked great and sat down in the chair, kind of looked me over a little bit, and we proceeded to have an 1.5 hour long conversation that's been watched by, I think, over 1 million people at this point. And I never thought this episode would be a defining moment of London Real. I told Dan on the show, London Reelers are either gonna love you or hate you. And you can see I'm really skeptical on this show. And I'm like, I introduce him and I'm like, you're some type of a Bond villain. You have a castle in Scotland. And I'm kind of making a joke. And again, Dan looks at me because he's not used to people joking about him, because most of his followers worship him, and most of the guys he's done business with in the past respect him. But I didn't know much about him. So I proceeded to ask hard questions and to try to delve into his process, and also try to give him a fair interview. I try to do that with anyone that sits in the chair. And so I want to play for you a short clip of something that went viral on the back of this interview. And this is Dan with a very famous phrase. And this is also Dan starting to push me a little bit. He's starting to kind of dig into me a little bit and say, Brian, is this really all you can do? Is this what you're all about? And so here's Dan talking about money and Zen. Shall we do this?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. This is London Real. My guest today is Mr. Dan Pena, who is an American-born businessman, entrepreneur, and mentor who lives in a castle in Scotland. Dan, you're like a James Bond villain in that way. And you know, you're dressed for success. I don't know many people that can pull off a three-piece suit and a gold chain. That's fantastic. You are the author of the book, Your First 100 Million, which you just gave me a copy. Thank you very much. I guess that's $100 million.
Correct.
Okay. What do you tell people that you do when they ask you? What do you say?
Well, the last 20 years, I've been a coach, mentor, high-performance coach to the select few that really want to be all they can be.
Let me ask you a question. You know we're very zen here on this show, and we talk a lot about...
I'm here anyway.
Yeah, you're here anyways, exactly. You know, we like to shake it up here and try some different things. What if I said to you, you know, okay, this guy is going to be ultra successful. He's going to make $1 billion. What if I said, Dan, why does it matter what he makes? You know, or
it doesn't matter.
Or my question is, you know, to you, that is the ultimate metric of success.
No. Money's not the only thing in life, but it's the only thing anybody keeps track of. It's measurable, accountable. Since the pharaohs.
Okay, right.
Size of the pyramids, etc. Okay.
It's a metric you can keep track of.
Correct. But what I give you, Brian, is the ability to have more choices. I have more, I'm just assuming I have more money than you. So I'm going to say that I have a lot more choices than you do.
Because you have more money than me.
If you want to send your kids to a better school, if you want to be able to take care of your mother when she gets dementia, if you want to, this all takes money, not Zen. I never paid a bill with Zen.
Then the unexpected happened. People love Dan.
Most of us go through life with our emergency brakes on. Then you release the brake. What happens? Whew. I get people to do that they think they're impossible. You come to me with your goals. By the time you leave at the 7th day, your goals are a factor between 5 and 100 times bigger. You give me your business model in 120 seconds, and I'll tell you in 60 seconds whether it will work, if it can't work, how to fix it, or whether the shit can't.
Okay, that's your specialty.
Correct.
But you probably charge a lot of money for that. Do you ever think to yourself and look in the mirror and you're in your castle and you're like, you know what, I need to get rid of all this stuff. I need people to meet me and not know that I'm, you know, Dan Pena of the castle in my CV, and I need people to tell me straight and be like, who the hell is this guy? And I have to, you know, start over again. Do you ever think that that would be one of the ultimate challenges for you?
No, but I've got a better challenge. Okay. Bringing 25,000 people across the goal line that should be living in a homeless shelter is much more satisfying than that.
And it made me think.
You could whip me into shape?
Yeah.
You think?
You'd be a tough sled, but like Atlas Shrugged, you know, pushing the...
Why would I be tough, Dan?
Because you...
Am I set in my ways?
No. At your age, you can't be set in your ways yet.
Okay. Am I in my comfort zone too much?
That's probably... I don't know you well enough, but that could be it.
Okay.
You seem to enjoy what you do. Or you got a pretty good shtick about it, so...
Right.
Okay. There will be a life beyond London Real.
Yes, there probably will.
Yeah, I'm sure. You're too young. I don't think you can do London Real until you're 55 or 60. It's not likely.
Okay, this is good. Come on.
Yeah.
Give me a few minutes, free consultation.
No. Once I get you to release your emergency brake, Brian.
Then you'll be carrying me over
notwithstanding your Zen.
Yeah. You think the Zen is hurting me?
No.
Actually?
No. It's
Okay.
It's where you're supposed to be today.
Dan, you are an original. You are a unique gentleman. Thanks for coming here and telling us about yourself. I asked you some hard questions, and I appreciate you answering them.
My pleasure, and I wish everybody in the audience all the luck and good fortune they earn.
One of the crazy things when you have a show where you broadcast every week is that you get these video diaries of who you were 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. So for me, it's always crazy to watch Brian from 2014, because there I am in high definition multi-camera, and I can see my brain trying to get my head around Dan, and part of me is trying to kind of push back with my, you know, alpha maleness against this guy who's trying to get in my face, but part of me also is looking to an older man who's been successful and asking myself, what can I learn from him? And also asking myself honest questions like, how was I really doing? And deep down inside, I knew I wasn't where I wanted to be. London Real wasn't where it needed to be. And so that day, Dan planted the seed. And he always told me that we put up a picture earlier where I had a picture with Dan against the brick wall of the old studio, and I put a jacket on, a suit jacket I had in the closet right before we took the picture. And he said to me recently, he said, I knew I had you when you put the suit jacket on, because he said, you obviously felt underdressed and felt like you wanted to be more. And I retorted with, of course I wanted to be more, Dan. Everybody who's a high performance person wants to be more. So I just went back to him. But we continue to argue to this day. But after the camera stopped that day, Dan stayed in my studio for another 2 or 3 hours. And he kept talking more, talking to me. He debunked a lot of personal help people and said, I know this guy is broke, and I know this guy doesn't own his house, and like all this stuff. He proceeded to even insult some of the people that I had looked up to. And then we walked outside the studio. This is the old place on Tabernacle Street. And went to get a taxi for him. And he stood out in front of me before the taxi was arriving, and he put his hands out and he said, Brian, look at me. And it was nighttime at this point. And he said, can you see a green glow around me? And I was like, what? He said, can you see a green glow around me? Some people see an aura around me. And I said, no, Dan, I can't see a green glow around you. I was like, this guy's obviously off his rocker. And then he went to shake my hand and he said, Brian, I change people's lives, and I'm gonna change your life. And he jumped in the black taxi and went back to the Ritz. And honestly, the next 24 hours, my brain hurt. I felt like I had drank ayahuasca. And a lot of people think that's ridiculous, because ayahuasca is a plant medicine that is more on the hippie spectrum than the capitalist spectrum. But in both instances, whether it's ayahuasca or Peña, you see a different reality, a version of yourself that maybe you want to be. With ayahuasca, maybe it's a better person, a more giving person, a more real person, a person that doesn't do these bad things. And with Peña, I saw a version of someone I might want to be as well. And then you're processing that with your current reality and realizing, why aren't I this person? What do I have to do to become this person? So for the next 24 hours, I was really shaken up. And I talked about this later. I talked about this in the movie, about how it got under my skin, and it got me thinking, do I keep talking to this guy or not? And so that was the seed. It was planted. It was followed by email after email after email. And when we made the movie, The $50 Billion Man, you can watch all this content, by the way, on our website for free. I went through all these old emails. And there, of course, all of Dan's emails are in all caps, red letters. That's not like a joke. That wasn't like a creative piece I stuck in the movie to make it more impactful. That's actually how he writes emails. He uses his two fingers, and he abbreviates things like LOL and WTF. He actually does that. He wrote me these long emails, and he was just supporting me. He said, Brian, if there's anything I can do, please help me. He'd write me a 3-page long email talking about the reaction he got and what people were saying and what he saw me doing. And I think a lot of people forget Dan can be an extremely generous person, more so than any other guest I had on London Real, even my so-called buddies or whatever. Dan was just constantly staying in touch with me. And then he said, Brian, I want you to come to dinner at the Ritz. And this was in August. I still remember it was a Sunday night because I had to put a suit and tie on a Sunday. And I hadn't worn a suit and tie in years, probably 10 years, because I didn't even wear one in banking at the end of my career. And I put a suit and tie on. I brought Mariana to the Ritz, which is a hotel in London, very famous. And we proceeded to have dinner with Dan and Sally, which was, again, a little tricky because Dan can get in everyone's face. He got into my wife's face a little bit, started making fun of where she was from. I kind of made fun where Dan was from, but it's just how Dan does that. He tests everybody. And at the end of the night, he said, Brian, if I'm going to mentor you, you got to come to the castle.